Hey, there we are. We're on. Let me just adjust my, no touching, adjust my mask. Hey everyone, how you going? Welcome to another live grain and grape brewing and demonstration. Hope you're all doing well out there. My name's Joel. You may know me as the guy who spends his time behind the camera, doing stuff there. And today we have Helen, who's going to be brewing a Saison. That's right.
Yes, I'm brewing a Saison, and in fact it is bubbling away. Well, not quite bubbling away, it's mashing away there in the background.
Mash has begun and underway, so today you're doing things a little bit differently. Or you, I should say, have started the brewing process early. You thought we'd probably get that up and going and get it out of the way, and you're about to hit mash out.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're not quite at mash out. What we've got is the primary part of the mash is completed. We're going to bring the temperature up to about 75 degrees and hold it there for 10 minutes, and then we're going to sparge with about 3 litres of water, and then bring it up to a boil and head from there. So.
Cool. All right, well, let's get a bit of business out the way. Chat on the, well, I hope I got that right, the left side of the screen, I think it's your right. Please use it, chat away. We like to see a healthy discussion going on there. If you have any questions, by all means, shoot them through. We may not be able to answer all of them, but don't let that stop you. Hopefully there'll be someone else out there watching who may be able to chime in and answer as well. Anything else?
Today's session is geared towards the beginner intermediate brewer. I'm definitely not a microbiologist, and Saisons, it is definitely all about the yeast, but we'll cover a lot of ground because Saison is a really fascinating beer style. We can have a little bit of a chat about the machine that we're actually brewing on, which is the Guten. Talking about the brewing process. So your questions are most welcome. If you've got a story that you want to share with everyone, please do. Whether that's of an amazing Saison that you tried in your travels through Europe, or possibly even maybe Australia. We're doing some amazing Saisons, and the US is definitely kicking goals with Saisons and wild ales. If you've actually brewed an amazing Saison, share that story with us. It's an absolutely fascinating style, and it's a great topic for us Saturday mornings. So we're actually coming to you from Yarraville in Melbourne.
Sunny Yarraville.
Maybe not sunny, but Yarraville, it's going to be a lovely warm day, a great day for brewing, and and hope you can stick around for a short time or a long time, and let's get stuck into it. So
all right, I'll get out of the way.
Yeah.
Do my thing, and I'll leave you to take it away.
So what we're doing today is of course we've got a just going to repeat myself. We've got a mash on the go, and we're going to sparge out. Oh, we've got some beeping happening there. So just hang on. What I'm going to do is going to turn the temperature up manually on the Guten up to 76, and we'll just get this going. So excuse me for a moment. My back towards you. Manual.
I'll just get myself set up down here. So Saisons are one of my favourite styles of beer to drink and brew, I've got to confess. Before there were cavaques, there were Saisons. I guess you could say it's one of those styles that is really easy to brew, especially for beginners, because, for a multitude of factors, which Helen will no doubt explain.
Yes, I will.
What do people out there think? I'm seeing that the chat's a bit quiet, so what do people think about Saisons? Have you brewed one before, like Helen was saying? What are your experiences? What are your favourite breweries that make them? Let us know.
Okay, so we've just got that on the go. So just a little bit about the Guten. It's a one vessel system, very much mirrored on a brew in a bag. You can put all the mash water in, depending on your grain, the size of your grain bill, or you can do what I'm doing today. Is my grain bill is about just under 5 kilos of grain, and I put in 25 litres of water. When I actually mash out, I'll sparge with about 3 litres of water to bring it up to around volume up to around 26 litres. And what we're aiming for today is to actually fill a cube, which I have one. Yeah, we're aiming to fill one of these cubes of wort, and it will be. It'll just be a no chill, and it'll be put aside to be fermented at another point in time. So I've become a little bit of a fan of these machines. Sorry, I am sounding like I'm a saleswoman here. They're simple to use. They're light. They're not that expensive. They allow you to control the temperature, and they produce good wort. You can recirculate the wort as it's mashing, so you get reasonably good efficiency out of them. I was looking at an online forum last week where some people indicated that they're getting better efficiency, even better efficiency out of them by occasionally giving it a stir during the mash. That would be entirely up to you. Normally, I would use a brew in a bag. But my pot is nearing the end of its life, and I've decided instead of buying another pot, I'm not going to buy an urn. I'm just going to buy one of these machines. There's a couple of different options available in the Australian market. This is as good as any of them that are available. Of course, we've got the top of the line, which is the Braumeister, and Joel has a 50-litre Braumeister, which he's thinking of getting rid of to buy a smaller Guten, but that's more of a size a size issue than an issue with the actual machine itself.
About that earlier, weren't we? We were talking about the Guten, and you were thinking of getting one, and I was. Postulating, is that a word?
It is now.
Let's disregard that. I was just mulling. Well, I had been mulling over whether to get a Guten or just invest in another Braumeister, but they're good machines. They do the job. But it doesn't matter, whether you've got a 3-vessel, whether you have a pot in a bag. You're going to produce wort, and there's tricks around getting good wort out of pot in a bag, or you're doing extract brewing. It's whatever you're using to get to your wort, or you could come to a place like Grain&Grape and actually buy a wort kit where the wort has been already made for you if you don't have the time to brew or the room to have any brewing equipment in your house. So today I am brewing a Saison, as we've already hinted at, and it's a very simple recipe that we're using today. We've got one sort of grain, which is I'm using Gladfield American ale malt, and we're using 4.75 kilos of it. We're aiming to get a opening gravity of around 105.2, and depending on the yeast, it's going to finish somewhere under 1010, anywhere from probably 1 through to 1009. So I'm just keeping an eye on where we're going with this, the temperature. And this recipe, I haven't actually done anything particularly
inspiring with it, other than it is actually, I've gone to the American Homebrewers Association website. I am a member, so they've got a lot of recipes there that are only available to members, but there's quite a few recipes that are available for free access. So I've provided Joel with a link to the recipe that we're using today, and it's called Bale So Hard Dry Hopped Saison. It was brewed as part of the 2016 Great American Beer Festival Pro-Am competition. It's basically a dry hop Saison, and it's using 2 hops, one that I'm not necessarily a fan of and one that I am a fan of.
The recipe is, just for anyone interested, it's linked in the description below, so if anyone wants to go have a look at the recipe and follow along, it's just right down there, links down there. But the Saison recipes are traditionally quite simple, aren't they? We'll
get to that. This is a particularly simple recipe, and I think it probably just highlights that Saison is just a style that is so open to interpretation. There aren't a lot of boundaries with the style, and so what we've got just an American ale malt. We're going to hop it 45 minutes with Sabro. On the recipe it's called HBC 438, so that's before Sabro actually had a name. And so basically we've got Sabro and Mosaic hops. And the suggestion in here is with a recipe is a White Labs WLP 670 American Farmhouse Blend yeast starter. It's a mixture of Saccharomyces and, did I say that correctly? Saccharomyces and Brettanomyces. Here on in, I'm going to call that Sac and Brett. And the Brett will definitely bring some funky characteristics to the table. Now, I'm just going to take care of some work that we need to do here. So just bear with me, people. We'll do a little bit of business. So I'm just going to take this out.
So let me know.
So we're just. This is just a pump attachment, so we're just sort of recirculating the work through there. We'll take the lid off and just put it over here out of the way. And
I like the little musical chime that's used when it's...
it actually has lots of little chimes. I've chosen not to program this particular vessel today. I find if it's not my vessel, I'm not going to put the time and effort into actually doing it. It's easy enough to manually do things. Now, this is actually not super heavy, but because I'm coming from a height, I'm just going to need a little bit of... At home, I would have an actual winch to assist me with this. So we've got it here. So what we need to do is pull it up and just give it a little bit of twist. So it's some little divots that it actually sits on.
I can see. Okay,
so,
okay,
yeah. And there's a little bit of suction goes on here as well. Come on. Okay, what we're going to do, twist it towards you. Yep. There we go. Beautiful. Okay.
Ben and I often comment on when using the Braumeister, the challenge of getting the malt type out.
So it's one thing if you're sort of working from the ground. So OHS, if possible, do this down low. Have a winch or have a friend here to assist you. Thank you very, very much, Joel. Now I do have some water I prepared earlier. Now, just in regards to the water, here in Melbourne, we've got we're blessed with very good water, and the only adjustment that I've done to the water today is we've used a Camden tablet to dechlorinate. Saisons don't like the yeast, you definitely want to get rid of the chlorine in the water.
Yes.
So a Camden tablet will do that. You can boil the water. You can use, whatever you're doing in your brew house will be suitable, as long as you just get rid of the chlorination.
Yeah, that's a good general tip for everyone out there. Water, looking after your water at the very least, just so that you can get the chlorine out. Things along.
Now,
Camden tablets is one way to do it. Filter. Some people will they'll fill the water up.
Yeah, just let it sit. You can boil it. It's entirely up to you. Now, ideally, the water that I'm using to sparge would be at the same temperature as the brew pot, but I don't have that luxury here today, so the water was probably at about 65 degrees. So not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. And I also had some Camden tablet in that water as well. So whilst that's doing that, coming back to the recipe, it was just a simple infusion mash at 66 degrees for an hour, and there's a lot of Saison recipes will call for a step mash. You would have heard the term of the malts today are extremely well modified, and a step mash is not necessarily required. Having one of these machines makes it really easy. If you want to do it, it's easy to program it in and have it just automatically step up. Brewlosophy, which I'm a fan of, they're like the myth busters of brewing. Yeah. And I did track down that they've got they did do a comparison between single infusion mash and step mashing, and they could discern a little bit of difference amongst their tasters, but not probably enough to necessarily that you should be doing it, because it didn't make that much of a discernible difference. There was a little bit more depth of malt character in the beer that they actually did. So we're just going to let that sit there for 10 minutes, and then we'll head sprint or maybe limp towards the boil, because sometimes these things can take a while to get up to speed, and that's on its way. So just coming back to this particular recipe is, and I suppose to it highlights that Saisons can be whatever you want, and they originate out of Belgium, France. 1800s. Imagine. Sorry, I can imagine this.
It's taking us there right now.
It's summer. The harvest season's on. There's a lot of work around the farms. This is before you had tractors, harvesters, machines that come and shake trees. You had an army of people who would have to come and do the work on the farm. And I'm going to take creative license here. Every farm had its own.
Go for it.
Every farm had its own unique farmhouse beer that was unique to that farm, that used the microbes and whatever was floating in the air to create a beer for the workers. And I suppose the thing to think about is that whilst we can turn on the tap and get really clean water, and we are very, very lucky. A lot of areas around the world, especially in history, the water was not clean. The water wasn't treated particularly well. So,
I guess is what you're saying. It's not. Yeah, it was.
It was unsanitary, and so beer was the refreshing drink that was given to the workers at the end of a long, hard day. And I'm going to take even more creative license and say that the quality of your beer would attract the best workers.
Yeah,
I just made that up.
We continue that tradition here at Grain&Grape.
So every farm would have something different, and we also have a style which is starting to sort of make a little bit of a comeback, and you possibly would have called it a table saison, but known as a grisette, which is a lower ABV farmhouse style ale which was served to miners. Now, saison, of course, is French for the word season, and grisette has a component of French for grey. And when I was doing research into where the word grisette came from, it was attributed to the smocks that the women's were wearing when they served the miners beer when they came out of a mine. It was reference to the rocks in the areas of where the mines were. Who knows? I'm going to attribute it, again, I'm just taking creative license, to the fact that the miners were grey when they came out of the mine, and so grisette. So these are very, I suppose, styles that are steeped in history, and as the 1800s rolled on, and as we rolled into the 1900s, some of these, as you know, other styles sort of started to they disappear as other styles come along, and we see a little bit of it just happening in a very short space of time, where we see styles coming and going and then being resurrected, or another style. Lagers were very popular for a long time, and then the pale ale came along, and then the IPA came along, and now the hazy Nanipa has come along, and all of a sudden lagers and pilsners start getting sexy again. And saisons, there was in the 1900s there was European brewers who maintained the style. Definitely the need for having a beer on your farm to water the workers at the end of the day disappeared as the Industrial Revolution took hold. The same with the grisette with the miners, is that the mines closed down, so you have no miners, so you have no need for grisette. But in the last, I suppose, 20 years or so, you've seen the interest in styles that are possibly being lost or faded into time has become resurrected, and you see that some of the amazing, you've taken a premise, an idea, a style, and just taken it to all new levels. And I think the Americans have probably really run with the saison style, and it's from saison. I suppose that you start to get that leverage into wild ales, because essentially saisons, do have that degree of there's a farmhouse quality, and there's a degree of funk. Some of the very popular styles out of Europe have more, I suppose, that you would call the classic saison, have almost homogenised the flavour of saisons, and we'll get to that. Now, just going to have to bear with me. I'm just going to have a drink of water. Excuse me.
Stay hydrated.
And I'm just going to.
Saisons, and I don't know if this is maybe one of those myths that got perpetuated, but saisons, as you were saying, as a style, commercially, or pretty much died out, and it was homebrewers who kind of revived it in, I don't know, the last 20 years, maybe 30 years. I'm kind of, again, I'm taking a bit of creative license there of my own. I certainly never heard of one before I started brewing, and even when I started brewing, I never heard of a saison. And then I think in maybe the late 90s, 2000s in America, the homebrewers started researching some of the older styles that weren't really popular anymore, or almost didn't exist, and saisons was one style that was revived through homebrewing. And then in the commercial brewing, the craft beer explosion that happened in the States is probably particularly through the 90s and early 2000s, and then a bit later here, home brewers went on to become actual brewers. They started breweries of their own and they started brewing these styles. And here they are.
It's a very it's such an interesting style, and working in the store, you know, it's, if you can imagine, it's December, it's getting pretty warm. Someone walks through the door and they go, I want to start home brewing, and you know that people want to start home brewing because they know someone who does it successfully, or they've decided that they want to brew their favourite brew, whatever their reasons for wanting to home brew. And you want people, when they're starting out, you want people to hit the ground running and produce really good beer, because it's very disheartening to produce something that tastes like homebrew. And a lot of that homebrew characteristic comes from poor fermentation control. And if you don't have fermentation temperature control, and if you don't have that temperature control, then you're going to have all sorts of weird and funky things happen with your yeast. But the beautiful thing about Saisons is that Saisons love a little bit of temperature. And in fact, the more temperature there is, the more of a Saison character you're going to get out of your yeast. So I'm all for it. If you don't have temperature control and you want to home brew during summer in Melbourne, which the temperature can be extremely variable, but assume it's going to be hot. There's two, I suppose, good yeast options available, albeit I don't think it's interesting, because I think Saison lays all within the yeast, but it's got its actual own style. But there's the other yeast that's become quite popular in the last few years, which is Quake yeast. I'm going to pronounce it Quake.
Yeah, okay. So I've always pronounced it Quake. So what? School us on.
So if someone wants to disagree or has another way that this yeast should be pronounced, then please let us know. But I'm going to say it's Quake. And both Saison yeast and Quake are happy operating at high temperatures. And in fact, one of the yeasts that we've got here in the store, which is a Y yeast, I think it is the Belgian Saison, the 3724. My research indicates that it will quite happily go up to 38 degrees.
38? Wow, okay, I didn't even know that.
I believe everything I read on the internet. It was on the internet. It's true. And surely homebrewers don't embellish and lie, and definitely not. So it is one of those. It's an ideal beer to brew when you don't have temperature control, especially during the summer months. And the temperature on a Saison, of course, and the same with some other yeasts as well that fall into that Belgian category. You're going to get, the warmer the fermentation temperature, the more character you're going to derive from that yeast. And the character, of course, it depends on the yeast that you're actually using. The malt bill for Saisons is pretty simple. Today we're just using one malt. Pilsner malt's very popular, European, wheat, spelt, oats, rye, whatever you really want to throw at it. 80% your base malt, so a Pilsner or an ale malt. You'll see a lot of recipes will be saying to use some sort of Belgian malt. Use whatever you've got available. If you've got some Pilsner, you've got some ale malt. You can even throw some Vienna malt at it, whatever actually you want to use. And of course, the more you're adding malt character, like by using ale malt instead of Pilsner malt. There's going to be a little bit more malt character. I could have padded it out with some other malts and give it a little bit more complexity. But with this style of beer, I'm not actually looking for complexity in. With the malt, I'm actually wanting the complexity to come from the yeast and the little bits and pieces that I'm adding to it. So the great thing about Saisons is that the sky's the limit to what you want to add to it. And so today we're actually doing a how are we going on the boil here? It's boiling. No, it's basically no. It's just heading up that way. It is a lie. So today, the beer that we're doing is going to be it's about the hops, and we're using a little bit more. We're using some aroma. Flavour type hops. You always need to throw some hops in, so you've got the traditional German varieties that you can throw at it. Helletar, what's it? Strings? Oh. Anyway, the name escapes me. UK hops. You could even throw something clean like Magnum. It's because it's not about it's not about the hops. It's going to be all about the yeast. There's a lot of people you'll get to about 5 minutes before the end of a boil, and you can add pepper, cardamom, ginger. Coriander seeds, dried orange peel. Be very judicious in the amounts that you're using in a. Here we go. It's starting to head on. In a brew this size, you wouldn't be adding more than a couple of teaspoons of spice at the end. But again. You need to know what your yeast is actually bringing to the table as to how much of that you really want, because you are going to get some of that spicy, peppery character coming out of the yeast depending on what you actually use. On the other side, when you're fermenting, of course you can use the spices again. One of my favourite saisons I ever brewed, I actually brewed it here at the shop, was I used passion fruit puree. Essentially, I dry hopped it with some mosaic, and I used passion fruit puree. I adored that beer. I drank a lot of it from the wall of beer. When the shop is open and we have customers coming in, all the beers that we brew in demos actually go on the wall of beer, so people can actually come in and try them. And it's a good way, especially if you've seen one of the demos. It's a really good way to sort of see what the end result is actually going to be like. I've also used raspberries. I've used mango. Doing research, don't limit yourself to fruit or spices. The peel, fruit juice, oak cubes soaked in red wine, raisins, currants. Whatever you want to throw at this, it will take. And I've got a recipe that I printed out. Excuse me as I rustle through some papers, which was developed by Mike Tonsmere. Who's the mad fermentalist, and he's actually gone on to open a brewery called Sapwood Cellars with Scott Janish, the hop guy. Yeah. So Sour Guy and the hop guy got together and opened a brewery, and my bucket list. Yeah. Yeah. So Michael wrote I think it's called American Sour. it's an absolutely phenomenal resource into sour beers. And he's also got I think he's done podcast, and he's also got a website, fermentationist,
fermentationist.
Yeah, and they did a dark winter saison, which was inspired by Russian River's consecration. And if anyone's had a consecration, it is.
I've not had the opportunity. Actually, I don't think I've.
It is truly, which is a dark ale aged in Cabernet Sauvignon barrels for 4 to 8 months, and with black currants and souring microbes. So they've done so this is actually available on the American Homebrewers, this recipe on the American Homebrewers website, but it's using actually the WL670 American Farmhouse blend, which we've already discussed, which actually has a Brett component in it. But the malt base is Vienna malt, special bee malt, American chocolate, Carafa 2, and some roasted barley. And in the secondary, they've got currants, and they also throw in oak blocks soaked in red wine. And then you have to age it. So it's where I'm sort of heading with all of this is that Saison has no limits. It can be. We've just we spoke about sort of standard malt bills, but you can also have a dark Saison. There is no reason why you can't do that.
That recipe that you just spoke of, is that one of the free ones?
No, unfortunately, it's not one of the free ones. But I was really taken with it, and I'm going to brew it.
Okay.
So it's, but but of course, it actually needs. It was in the 2014. May-June 2014 Zimmergy magazine as well. So if anyone's sitting on any of those particular magazines, that's where that recipe comes from. But yeah, you're looking at probably. This will definitely need some time to age, which is another topic. Now, how are we going here? Cool. It's unfortunately slowly just coming up to the boil. So just checking the time. Okay, so basically your malt is whatever you've got. Don't be dictated by what you see in some recipes, or you must use this. There is a BYO magazine recipe, which is article on the internet, which is freely available to read, and you do see some prescription around what you should do. Do whatever you want. It is really. It's just open to interpretation.
And this is the malt you're talking about.
Yeah, the malt. The yeast, of course. Yeah, the yeast is where everything absolutely it happens. So yeah, when you get into the secondary, you can throw all sorts of things at it. I do need to brew another one with the passion fruit puree, which is just as a summer beverage is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, those little puree kits are good.
Yeah, well, you can use those. You can actually use those. What do I call them? We've got them here at the shop.
Amaretti.
Amaretti.
Yes, concentrates.
Concentrates.
Yeah.
There's something that you can actually use.
But you used it was from the supermarket, was it?
No, I tracked my trying to get passion fruit puree was quite arduous, because most of the passion fruit puree anything at the supermarket had a lot of additives in it, and I didn't want those additives.
Okay, so
and
with the yeast, or
I didn't want any extra sugars or anything coming in. Excuse. I'm trying to adjust this properly, but it keeps moving as I talk.
Talking in a mask is not easy.
So I wanted and. Unfortunately, I don't know anyone who owns a passion fruit vine, nor when they come into the supermarket or the markets are they. They're very expensive, and you need a lot of passion fruit to get enough passion fruit puree. I tracked down a Brazilian company that was in a office tower in centre of Melbourne that basically had a little shop front, and they had a freezer full of different purees, and that's where I got my puree from.
You know you're a home brewer when you have to trek across town to an obscure little shop somewhere to find a particular ingredient.
Yeah. So I suppose we're sort of getting towards the yeast part of the talk. But has anyone that favourite saison that you might have had? The one of my favourite, and I suppose you look at that. People get very judgmental about beers, and I'm a BJCP judge, and sometimes it's very difficult that you have to judge a beer to style guidelines,
and to be judgmental.
But sometimes, like, no, you know what, you just want to enjoy a beer, and you don't want to go, it's not quite to style. You just want to really just. We're up to 90 degrees, so we're slowly getting there. You just want to enjoy a beer. So some of the saisons that I've enjoyed are maybe not, what you'd call the best saisons in the world. And one of my favourite saisons, which I started drinking craft beer around 2010. Was Bridge Road put out a beer called India Saison, and it was a collaboration between Nonyo out of, I think, Norway.
Oh yes, yeah. That's
so,
one that's kind of,
and it was like a hybrid of an IPA and a saison, and I absolutely adored this beer. I love the, but it seemed to have a sweet spot that was very hard to get. So when it was first released, the hops was sort of out. Were sort of overwhelming the saison character, and then you would hit this sweet spot of where the saison and the hops were in harmony. I think the hops that they were using for that were Galaxy and Ella, and the yeast strain I think was Nonyo's contribution to that beer. And then as it aged, the hops would drop off, and you would get the saison character would come through. And it wasn't a particularly strong saison character, but it was an enjoyable beer at any point in time. But if you could actually get that sweet spot, it was just something on a summer's day, sitting on the deck. It was just absolutely spot on.
So yeah, anyone out there have any favourite saisons you've tried, or any good examples of the style? Let us know in the chat. We're always looking for new beers to try.
Actually, we're always looking for new beers. So. Yeah, we're now sort of almost sprinting up to temperature, so I'll just keep an eye on that and make sure that we don't. And we
Mayday Hills as well, for anyone out there who's part of Beechworth Brewery, I believe.
Sorry, which one's that?
Mayday Hills.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
They're doing some really interesting, wild stuff.
I think that they're definitely Bridge Road have been on that sort of straddling that funky side in a number of different ways, and a little bit later we'll come back to what's actually available here in the Australian market. But of course the star of the show is yeast, and we've sort of touched on it a little bit, but it really you can have this wort, you can do whatever with it, but it all comes down to your yeast. It all comes down to your fermentation temperature. It all comes down to fermentation time. And I'm just going to go grab a few. I'll just duck out, Joel. Just a moment.
I'll see if I can.
Show and tell time.
Yeast, little packets of yeast. What we're saying. So yeah, this is where saisons shine. It's all about the yeast.
It is all about the yeast. Here at the store we've got, I suppose, 5 yeasts that you would primarily class as a saison yeast. And to start off, we've got some dry yeast, and what we've got here is we've got Bell Saison. So this is brew, dry yeast. It's a little bit one-dimensional. It is an absolute beast of a yeast, and I do like to use this one for fruity Saisons only because I want some Saison character, but I want to highlight the fruit character as well. This will ferment down to 1.
Right.
It is
truly a beast.
It is truly, it's an absolute beast. It behaves extremely well. You can go up to, some of these actually do have good information on them, but you're looking at sort of, around up to about, 28 degrees, 30 degrees for this one.
So dry yeast, of course, good for their convenience, easily handled. And
you don't have to do a yeast starter.
Yes.
And in fact, you don't even have to rehydrate them if you don't want to. And I haven't actually used this one. This is a typical yeast strain recommended for Belgian Saison style beers and characterised by a particularly high attenuation. It gives fruity aromas with a spicy character. And they're saying, your fermentation range is 18 to 28 degrees. My research indicates that this has a little bit more complexity than what the Bell does. Again, this is a beast and will take your gravity down quite low. Now it's so that's Saf Ale, and this is the Dan style for L'Allemande. Yeah. And one of the, I suppose actually one of the things that I haven't touched on is that Saisons usually are quite dry and quite tart. And a lot of that dryness comes from, that basically it's fermented out and you don't have much residual sugar left. And then you start to get into so this one here is Yeast Slap Pack 3711 French Saison.
See, they're all the Yeast have pretty much the same packaging, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They don't actually give you a lot of information. If you plug into the interweb Yeast 3711, it will bring you to some information such as this one here. Actually, we've got 3726, which is a farmhouse ale. And if you just plug it in, you can go to the Yeast website, and it says it produces complex esters balanced with earthy, spicy notes, slightly tart and dry for peppery finish, a perfect strain for farmhouse ales and saisons. And they're saying 21 to 29 degrees on that one.
So that was I'll put this in the chat too.
Oh, hang on.
A bit of a boil over. Okay, exciting times. You want to help the hand?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. See, I've never had a boil over before, and I have to do it at a demo. Isn't that fantastic?
Well, that's good. We can show people what it looks like.
No, it wasn't too bad.
It wasn't a bad one. I've seen worse.
There we go. Beautiful. Okay, just get that back going. And yes, it's boiling.
So that's it. We are officially in the boil.
So one of the reasons I tend to brew alone so that I'm not actually distracted.
Well, it's a good example of how boilovers can occur if you're you're off doing other things like running a demo, or if you turn your back. Usually you're not doing that at home when you're brewing, but just for anyone out there who doesn't know what a boilover is, it's when I guess the proteins in the wort, they kind of hit a critical mass, or they create like a cap on top of the surface of the liquid, and it creates, I guess, is it like nucleation points, or is it like almost like a super boil where it just lifts up and comes out of the pot and goes?
Okay. Well. That was a little bit of excitement that we hadn't planned on having. So, and then we get to back to
back to the yeast. So what was the code on that one?
So we had, so what we had was 3711, which is the French Saison.
French Saison, that was the first one.
No, actually the 3726 was the first one. So that's the Belgian farmhouse ale. Then we got 3711, which is the French Saison. And then we've got 3724, which is probably one of the more classic Saison yeast. So this is Belgian Saison, and both White Labs and Yeast actually have, I suppose, a strain that they call the classic DuPont strain, and this is Yeast version of it. This, as I mentioned earlier, this one I have on good reliable internet sources will go up to 38 degrees.
Yeah. And that is the...
And it is classic one. Now, some of these, with all of these, you have I suppose an ABV range of for Saisons between 3.5%, which is your table Saison, your grisette, and whatever label you want to put on it, up to about 9%. And when you enter a Saison into a homebrew competition for BJCP judging, you have to indicate what the strength of the beer actually is so that it can be appropriately judged. Obviously, as soon as you start getting over that 6-7%, you're going to get some alcohol character actually start to come out in the beer. And I do have another. I've got so many beers that I want to brew. It's a long list of them, but there is a beer called, and I thought I might have had the information. I obviously don't. Actually, since I don't have the information, I can't actually remember what it's called, so I won't go on that. We'll keep going on along, but yes, you can hit some really, really high ABV Saisons, and they are a joy. But to keep in mind that you do want them to be dry, you do want them to be tart, you do want some funk or some character to them. Now, some of these yeasts, sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked there. Some of I usually recommend that if your opening gravity is under 1050, don't bother when you use one of these slap packs, you don't need a starter. You'll probably, if the yeast is reasonably fresh, then you should have enough viable yeast cells to do the trick. And anything over that, you really do need a starter regardless, because you just need to make sure that you've got enough, that you're going to be pitching enough yeast. And I'm not going to talk about pitching rates during this discussion. But with Saisons, I'd recommend that if you are using a wet yeast, do a starter. You're just going to get a better result. And some of these yeasts will stall, and you're not going to get a fast ferment. It's going to take time. Sometimes, and as in all cases, when you get a stuck fermentation, first thing you do is turn up the temperature. And Saisons, that is a definite turn the temperature up. And in fact, you should be turning the temperature up, unless, of course, you want to inhibit some of those esters and phenolic characters that can come out during the fermentation process. But it will ferment quicker at warmer temperatures.
And that 3724, the Belgian Saison, my understanding is that is a notorious staller. Yep, it definitely stalls at about 1030. Okay. Yep, yes. It is. It will basically stall. And so maybe for those out there who aren't familiar with what we're talking about, stalling and stuck fermentation, would you like to? Yes, stuck fermentation. Having just had one. Oh yeah. Essentially your yeast will.
it appears to conk out, and it can conk out for a number of reasons. And you didn't have enough oxygen, there's not enough sugars, the yeast was old, not in good condition, you're doing things at really low temperatures. There's a lot of reasons why it becomes stuck. Yep. Sometimes it appears to be stuck, but it's just going incredibly slow. So I'm using a yeast at the moment which I love the outcome of, but it actually, I thought it really conked out. It was sitting for a week, nearly a week at 1019, and I needed it to be down around 1015, 1014, and it was still too sweet. And I went and actually made a little batch of wort to add to it, and I threw a whole pack of yeast in it, and I was going to use that to kickstart it. After I'd done that, and before I pitched this little batch of beer into it, I checked it, and it started moving again.
Okay.
And then it moved a little bit. So I've been sitting at. So this is it's a northeast ale yeast. So one of a Lallemand. So yeah, it was initially very, very vigorous, and then it just. So sometimes you actually do need time, and research on Saison yeast indicate that they do need time. But coming back to sometimes you just stuck fermentation. I really have never had great results when it happens. You can shake it, stir it, you can raise the temperature on it, you can pitch some more yeast, but if there's nothing there left to chew, well, that's maybe not going to help. You could just suck it up and go, well, I might actually blend it with something else. I've had friends who've actually taken it back and reboiled it, which hasn't led to the best beer in the end, but actually something that was drinkable. Yeah, sure. I have ended up with acetaldehyde through this process. So it's not good when it happens. So I suppose to stop this from happening, and ensure that you pitch adequate amounts of yeast. Use some yeast nutrient at the end of your boil. Ensure lots of oxygen, good healthy yeast, pitch enough yeast, ferment under the conditions that are ideal for that yeast. Ensure that you're not pitching to wort that's too hot, so you want to be pitching everything to be about on the same temperature level when you're doing your pitching, and also to understand that sometimes your stuck fermentation isn't actually a stuck fermentation. It is one of these tricky yeasts that actually just starts slowly meandering towards the finish.
A little rest in the middle of
and it's really frustrating when you are used to things fermenting out at a reasonable pace. I use Nottingham. If anyone's ever listened to one of my demos, you know that I'm a fan of Nottingham. It's a beast of a yeast, chews for everything, and basically within 5 days you're done. You've actually fermented all the way out. But some of these you just need patience, and I'm not a person. I just want the beer, and I suppose if you want the beer really quickly, something like a quake yeast, which you can ferment at higher temperatures, it will ferment out very quickly. Now, I don't know if anyone's had any experience fermenting under pressure. I haven't at this point. It's on my list of things to do, but maybe fermenting under pressure would give you some different results. I can't speak to that. I just but maybe someone out there has fermented under pressure and can stuck ferment something that happens when it's under pressure, or is it just going to get the most out of the yeast in a situation and ferment out as it should?
And particularly that 3724, the Belgian Saison, it does seem to be a hallmark of that yeast where it stalls. So if anyone's had experience with that yeast and has any war stories or tips, let us know.
Yep. Or if you've had a stuck fermentation and you've successfully overcome it. So one last thing on that before we go to a break is I have thrown super yeast at White Labs super yeast. I think it's 099. If you've got a high ABV beer, and you want it to, and it's stalled, super yeast will chew through anything that's left. But what it does do is it strips out a little bit of a character of the beer. So I did have a stuck ferment on a Russian Imperial Stout last year, and I used the super yeast, and yes, it fermented out another 12 points and got to where I wanted it to be. It's only, actually, I opened one the other day, and a year and 4 months in, it's now starting to taste okay.
Okay.
But it was definitely not tasting great. But we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in how many?
What do you want to say? 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
That's plenty of time, I think. I'll put a timer in the on the screen so people know when to come back. So don't go anywhere, or if you do,
I'll come back.
Come back. Yeah, by all means. All right. See you in a sec.
Bye.
back.
Hi, welcome back. We just had a short break. I don't think anyone's forgotten. It's Helen and brewing a Saison today and talking about all things Saison. If you have any questions, please ask them. If you've got any stories, we'd love to hear them. Just a quick thing about the Guten.
Yes, we did have a question.
Basically, you're looking at up to, I think this size, up to about 8 kilos of grain, but you can do as smaller batch as you want to do.
Right. Okay.
This is the first generation Guten, and its mash pipe is a little bit of a pill, but on the newer versions, they've actually got a telescopic one, and you just want to make sure that whenever you're mashing in and you put the plate on top of your grain, is that you just allow when you're recirculating the water, you just want the water to be able to just come over and actually go down the pipe. So whatever grain amount you want, it's going to.
Small as you want to go.
Yeah, but you just have to make sure that you don't have that if you're recirculating that you don't have the pipe sitting way up. You want it actually sitting too high. Okay. So there might be some limitations in that.
Yeah. Well, I guess you wouldn't be going below 5 litres or something like that.
No, you wouldn't. You don't want to be scorching or burning anything.
But certainly, by the sounds of it, that was I wasn't aware of that. That's quite handy.
Now these are some Sabro hops which are going in. We're just going to throw them in. That was only about. Hang on, just go back to the recipe. That was 14 grams. For someone who's brewing a lot of IPAs, 14 grams of hops as your first addition seems,
Seems rather puny.
Well, that's another call out about Saisons, and also things like Pilsners and Belgian ales, is that a lot of it costs. You can buy your grain in bulk. You can actually buy hops in bulk, but we don't tend to buy. You see that a lot of people are just buying hops as they need them for a recipe. And the thing about Saisons and Belgian ales and Pilsners and lagers is that you're not spending a shit ton on hops.
Yes,
it's very actually quite. You get amazing beer at almost a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of the here in Melbourne, we've got some breweries that are sort of releasing some very hoppy beers, from week to week, and you're paying a lot of money for them, and that's because they've got so many hops in them, and hops cost a lot, but. Back to yeast, because there's a lot to talk about in regards to the yeast. So Saison loves a bit of Brett, and it loves a little bit of funk. And traditionally, the farmhouse ales in France and Saison, Belgium would have a degree of wild microbes, wild yeast character, and so it is. I encourage you to funk your Saison up. Yes, funk it up, and you can do. Yes, and you can do that in a number of ways, and so we've actually touched on one, which is some of the yeast strains that are available out there will have Brettanomyces already as part of that yeast strain. But WLP 670, which has come up in the 2 recipes that I've stepped through today, has a Brett component in it and will actually give some funk character. But if your Saison yeast doesn't have any Brett in it and you want to funk it up a little bit, how do you do this? Well, you've got quite a number of ways. So you can do, the first way is to actually pitch Brett at the time that you're pitching your standard yeast, and you let them basically go at it together, and it will actually it will ferment out over, might take about 6 weeks. This is one of those ones where you need to give it some time, because the Brett will take a while to reach conclusion.
Yep.
So if you're pitching a sack yeast and a Brett at the same time, you're expecting that you're going to get down extremely low, and you will get down around the 1002 finishing gravity.
Completely dry.
They're very, very dry, and then of course you're going to get aging will bring some different characteristics and may soften out that Brett character. The other method is to actually pitch a Saison yeast up front, let it do all the work, and then when it's finished fermenting is to throw Brett at it at that point and let the Brett come and clean up all anything that's actually left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And your third method is to actually pitch, and this is where you do need some tough bottles, so champagne type bottles or thick glass bottles. You pitch it at the time that you're actually bottle conditioning, so you can add just a little bit of a little bit to the bottle at that point in time. So
obviously that's your not wanting to have bottle bombs is the idea there.
Yeah, so that's why you're using. So I'll actually just show you an example of. So this here, I was going to. Well, I can just show you the bottle. And green bottles are a thing for saisons.
Oh, okay.
Again, this is one of the interweb research findings. But here we've got an actual. This is. A wild Saison from La Serene, and we see that it's actually got the tirage cap on it. It's a thick bottle. It's got the divot in the bottom. It's green. So I think, yeah.
So Saisons are typically quite highly carbonated, which creates a lot of pressure in the bottle, and that can get a bit dicey as a home brew.
Yeah, you don't want bottle bombs. So this one's actually, it's La Serene Wild Saison is a curious beer that takes you into wild territory. Our classic Saison is co-fermented with 2 wild strains of yeast along with our proprietary yeast to produce a myriad of funky intricacies. Strong orange citrus tones play amongst complex farmhouse character, refreshing and palate-challenging beer. Oh, that's what you want to hear. Just left of centre, time to get a little wild. So you basically pour very gently. And because this is actually fermenting in the bottle. So how they've gone about, doing that. I'm not sure, but as a home brewer, if you are going to be doing any bottle conditioning where you expect some activity to be occurring in the bottle, you want to take precautions, and that is to use the proper glassware and the triage caps, and don't. That's why champagne comes in, those very thick-walled bottles and with corks. So
there's actually a practical reason for that. It's not just a
it's
fancy way of bottling. It's actually, and also for home brewers, don't be afraid of plastic bottles if you want to. A lot safer from a pressure standpoint. They can withstand a lot of pressure. Obviously, plastic isn't as fancy as glass, but
it's it's not sexy.
It's not, unfortunately. But certainly, if you're worried about pressure or making bottle bombs, if you're playing around with dosing Brett in the bottle, plastic is quite a good option.
Another option is to sour your Saison. And you can sour it by using lactobacillus, henceforth known as lacto. And this is actually, I just did find my article, just looking at this note on it. So using 3724 and some lactobacillus, if you are doing sour, you definitely want to ensure that you have that you don't use a lot of hops in your wort, because the IBUs will inhibit some of the character that will come from souring it. But 3724 is actually a really, really great, I suppose, starting Saison point. Starting yeast for leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just left of center, time to get a little wild. So you pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And just leveraging these different methods of fermentation. So you basically pour very gently. And of getting something very different out of your saison. Another option that you can use is I take this bottle. I've got my this is have the experience with it, and that is creating your own house culture.
Yes, yeah.
And that requires building up, because if you're just using, you know, you've just got some 3724 and you're sort of saving the yeast from that, it's going to deliver you not much change from from batch to batch. But what you want to do is start experimenting with increasing the complexity, and you can do that by using bottle dregs or using wild microbes that come from around your home or the parks in your area. And I'm not going to touch on the subject, but I do believe that Topher, the brewer and Wildflower in Sydney, has done a lot of this using native flora to develop their own yeast cultures, and I think that he has some really good blog information on how he's actually gone about it. But if you start looking around, you'll see that there is information out there on how to go about it, and no doubt someone's done a YouTube video, and there'll be information out there.
So that's Wildflower Beers in Sydney, who is a commercial craft brewer, and I believe the times I've dabbled in, if there's a website, Bootleg Biology, I think. If you do a Google search, Bootleg Biology, that they'll have guides on there, but as Helen said.
You've also got other sources. Milk for Funk is an amazing source. They have a very popular presence on Facebook, and they also have an extensive wiki covering off all sorts of topics. So if you're interested in taking developing a house culture, or that next step, there's lots of information and expertise out there. It's sort of scary, it's like the big unknown. But even we've got a in Bayside Brewers Home-brew Club. There's one of the brewers brews amazing saisons, and over quite a number of years he's built up a house culture, which he maintains and is working on. So I don't know, and I don't know where you sort of stop, and where at what point you go, this is actually this is what I desire. So what else have we got to talk about with the yeast? So the multi-layering we've touched on with the talking about introducing Brett. We've talked about introducing lacto, but you can also do this with actually the actual commercially released yeast strains. And the beer recipe that I thought I'd printed out and brought along, but I actually didn't, requires two completely different yeast strains that you actually make a starter with. And so you've got some very different things coming into play, and that's how you start out. So the yeast is where basically all the alchemy happens, the yeast and the fermentation temperature. But the different strains bring so many different things to the table. I stepped through the strains that we have available here at the store. If you see something in a recipe, you can contact, and we don't actually stock it. You can contact the store and see if they can actually order it in for you. Most good homebrew stores, keep yeast, and will actually source special varieties for you. I don't know at the moment. Of course, we're dealing with it's very topical. hence the mask. We're dealing with a pandemic. I don't know how.
Worlds. Yeah,
yeah, how easy it is to actually get yeast. How often yeast is actually coming into the country. But
generally speaking, I think we're pretty good for yeast, as in sourcing it from America in particular. Obviously, yes, that can vary depending on the ingredients or the equipment. There are lots of shortages on many things, but yeast, I think, if anyone has any special requests, it might take a bit more time than usual, but we'll certainly do what we can to accommodate.
Now, there's also another great source of information. There's actually some really good research information that I grabbed when looking into saisons, and for anyone who's viewing who attended the Australian National Home-brew Conference in October 2018 in Melbourne, we had Drew Beecham and Danny Kong from Experimental Brewing attended the conference and gave quite a number of talks. But Drew, but Drew is a passionate. He is very, very passionate about Saison, and coming back to something you said earlier, Joel, about home brewers sort of resurrecting styles, is he was mucking around with Saisons in around 2000. And he's a member of a homebrew club called the Maltese Falcons in California, and they've got a very good page called A Guide to Saisons and Saison Yeast. What they've also got on this particular link is some of the interesting saisons that club members have actually brewed, and you will see that you can throw anything into a saison. But I suppose just coming back to his points, and we've sort of touched on them. You want it to be dry, you want some earthiness, you want it to be spicy, you want it to be lively. We haven't talked about carbonation yet. Maybe a little bit tangy, maybe a little bit funky, maybe a little bit yeast driven. And coming back talking about the Belle Saison, that's where, when we're talking about one-dimensional, you're not getting many of those characters coming through. They're almost muted. But it makes it, it's a good entry yeast if you're wanting to muck around, or if you're wanting to add a lot of adjuncts and
sorry.
Yeah, go on.
No, yes. For beginners too, if you're wanting to dive into liquid yeasts, the French Saison is quite a easy one to work with as well. It's also a beast, and we'll just choose.
So that's 3711. 3711. Yeah, I think that was 3711. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got a nice funkiness to it too.
Yeah.
If you're into that kind of thing.
So yeah, they might have a little bit of a Brett character to it, but there's the sky's the limit. But coming back to the information that Drew's got, is he dives into so many different yeast that we don't have available. In the States, they have a wide, there's a lot of yeast companies, and we don't have our access.
Micro yeast companies too, just really small.
Very, very small. You have a lot of, some of the, the white labs and the Y yeast. We're only seeing a fraction of what they have available. They have a lot of seasonal yeast as well, and sometimes a little bit frustrating when you've tried a beer, or you're looking at a recipe and there's ingredients or yeast that you can't actually get, and I suppose you have to make the beer your own.
Yes.
And you just have to go, this is.
But it is, like you say, it is frustrating when you see all that. If you glance across the forums, US brewing forums, and you see what they're making and have access to, one does get a little jealous.
We do, but just a side note is that they really don't cold chill in. No chill in the US. And when I was talking to Drew about chill and no chill, they didn't really have cubes like we do.
Yeah, right. That's not.
So obviously I have cubes. It's what no one can see here is that I am looking at hundreds of cubes.
You're behind me.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll pull it. I don't know if anyone can see that.
No, there's.
If wondering what a cube looks like. It's,
there's a lot of cubes, and I'm talking about cubes because I haven't mentioned it, is that on a 500 litre Braumeister here at the store, we produce fresh wort kits. There's a number of organisations around Australia who do this. It's a really great way to get into brewing. I mentioned up front where you don't have to invest in a lot of pots, vessels, bags, but you do need fermentation equipment. And we've got one here which is the Saison, and it has a it's just a basic wort, and it uses, if I can read upside down, it's got estimated ABV will be 6 to 6.5. You can dilute it if you want. It's got about a starting gravity of 1057, and it's got the ingredients on it. It's got 25 IBU, so this one wouldn't actually be that suitable for souring because the IBU is too high. You'd be looking at nothing higher than about 14. It's got Pilsner wheat and dextrose, and it's used. It's actually got a number of hops in it: Pearl, East Coast, East Kent Goldings, and SARS, and they're producing indicating to use the yeast that we've actually discussed here today, because they are
just a classic.
It's a classic.
Traditional Saison.
We have. One of our long-term customers buys this particular wort, and he doesn't actually brew, but he does ferment, and he'll throw any sort of yeast at it, and throws all sorts of.
You can dry hop it.
You can also dry spice it. You can also do mini mashes on the side and actually add some more complexity to it, which we did with a barley wine wort kit. It's a very produces a very English style barley wine, but we decided we want a little bit more depth of character to it. So did a mash on the side and added that to the wort and fermented it out.
And so, on your, this is probably going back a little bit. We're talking about yeast that we can't get. Just another. A plug for reculturing or harvesting yeast from the bottles, as you were showing before, is another one.
Yes, I sort of went off on a little bit of a different tangent.
No, I don't know.
This is a really. I do have a story that didn't turn out too well of harvesting bottle dregs, but I think it's the. You've got to make sure that there's actually viable dregs there, that the beer hasn't been pasteurised. I think the Mad Fermentationist has had a list of beers where the dregs were not actually pasteurised. So it's something that's actually going to
actually have dregs.
Yeah.
So there's a what's the word I'm looking for? A procedure to it. There's a bit of effort involved, and maybe we'll.
Well, my story of bottle dregs is I brewed in 2017. I did a Belgian quad, and then I decided it would be a great idea to take 4 litres of that wort and throw in the bottle dregs of 2 bottles of Orval. Yes. Now, if anyone's familiar with Orval, it depending on the age, you're going to get something different. But it is a lot of funk, Brett character to it. You think when you say horse blank, it's like, what does that mean in beer? It's no, it means something like what's getting out of Orval. So I threw the dregs in. And then it's like, oh, that's actually really, really strong. So I don't know. I might have been temporary insanity. I then threw that 4 litres back into the 12, 13 litres of beer that I had. The Orval from those 2 bottles, the dregs, took over the entire flavour of the quad, and it's now 3 years in. And the Orval character has only just started to mellow out. be careful. Be careful. But something like this, it's an absolute beast. Now I'm just going to check the time as where we're at here. Okay, so I've got 20 minutes to go on there. So this would be this wild Saison fermenting bottle conditioning. Viable dregs.
There you go. Yeah. So
viable dregs and
stuff in there.
Viable dregs in that one. So that's a way to actually add some real character. And if you're looking at that house culture, is to start to get some to bring some complexity in. Is that some knowing? And if you like the beer, if you don't like the beer, then don't do it. Then definitely don't do it. So this also Australia. It's been a very interesting. It's such a great time to be a home brewer and a beer drinker, and I don't think we've ever had it as good as what we do now. And when I look at where the commercial beer, craft beer scene in Australia has come in the last 15 years, it is absolutely phenomenal. And I know the pandemic's probably put a little bit of a halt to it, but it wasn't that many years ago when a big name brewery from Europe or America would come into Australia and everyone would just fall over themselves trying to get to their beers. Now you see everyone falling over themselves to get to Australian beers, and we've got some brewers who are just really making their mark on the scene. And when it comes to saisons, if you look around, a lot of breweries in Australia have a seasonal saison, have a saison, always on the go, grisette. And there's some breweries that really stand out as being as really, I suppose it's what they're doing. And one of them, so I'll bring up this bottle again. I know I keep bringing it up. So La Serene, absolutely amazing saisons. And this is what they specialise in doing, wild farmhouse ales, and they do it particularly well. And they've been doing it for well, I'm not quite sure, but somewhere in the early teens. And their marketing, their artwork is just amazing. And I did attend a Ale Stars talk many years ago where Costa, they actually got a yeast strain out of Europe, and that's where they started. I suppose if you know of another brewer in Australia who's really kicking goals with saisons and farmhouse ales, call it out on the chat. But La Serene are definitely, I think, are really at the peak of saison brewing in Australia. But you've got Wildflower doing absolutely amazing things, and in Melbourne, out in Reservoir, we've got Future Mountain. And they're doing all sorts of things funky. And I did try, was it late last year? I'm losing track of time. It is still 2020 and it's September 2020. But they actually, adding coffee to a sour ale. And to give you some indication of how, this is not just something that they did. They trialled different coffees for over 3 months, and then when they actually they put the coffee into the work, they left it there for only a very minimal amount of time to just give it a coffee flavour. And the attention to detail is just phenomenal. I have a few other examples. So we've talked about this bottle. Yes, here it is again. This is one I actually drank it last night. Quiet Deeds, which is known more for their absolute hop bombs at the moment. They did a grisette, which was 3.7%. Very easy beer to drink. La Serene also do a lot of drinking table beers, citrus, sour. So yeah, just that light with really sessionable Belgian type beers, a little bit of light funk.
I really do quite enjoy table beer. I'm getting into mid-strength beers myself, lighter beers in general, and they're really good. For any one out there looking for a light beer to brew that has a lot of flavour. The Saisons or Grisette styles are really
I think, 3.7%, it was very easy to drink. The reason why I'm showing you some examples of Australian Saisons and Grisettes is because you may not know a lot about the style, and it'd be, so to know that at your local bottle shop, or maybe Dan's, you might find some Saisons or Grisettes. So this is a Boat Rocker Saison. Boat Rocker also do a lot of funky stuff and Saison type brews. Their stuff is definitely worth seeking out. This one seems like a big bottle. This is actually a very small microbrewery, Northern Rivers, New South Wales, Forest for the Trees. This is not a particularly the most complex Saison in the world, but late last year when I did a beer tasting at work where bring in just four beers of different styles for the non-beer drinkers to try, everyone loved this. It was universally, out of the 4 beers that we had, the favourite beer. A little bit of light spice, a little bit of light fruit, and actually extremely easy to drink.
You can see on the label there they've got some spice. And
so it's so born of the Belgian and French origins, our ales are linked to times when beers were brewed for simpler occasions and honest working folk. It's complex aromas of spices and fruit with a clean malt backbone across the palate, finishing refreshingly dry and zesty. And then we come to
the one and only
Saison DuPont, and I suppose this for many epitomises what a Saison is.
Yeah.
I'm trying to convince you that it's not. It's one example of a Saison. It's a Saison is what you want to make it.
As far as classic Saisons, I suppose.
I suppose because it's been around for a while. There are a lot of European breweries that have Saisons, and you've got this. My pronunciation of words is probably not the best. I'm just making a call out here. So, but you've got Saison de Petre, which is from. Oh, you know what? I'm going to give that up. I can't even pronounce it. You've got Saison de Pinnacle from Brasserie Dunham. You've got which is that's a European brewery. All of these have got funkiness, they can be cloudy, they can be clear. There's a lot of Brettanomyces. Arthur, which is from Hillstead Farmstead in the US, is it's a mixed fermentation Saison, which is I think what we've been talking about here. And they actually have a house culture which has yeast, lacto, and Brett, the sack lacto Brett, ferment slowly in open fodders. It's just there are so many examples out there.
Another one that is quite hard to get. But if you ever see it, grab it. Fantôme.
Fantôme I've had some really funky, funky weird beers from there. Now I've just got to do a little bit of housekeeping with our beer here, which it's just been after our exciting boil over has just been doing its thing. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to add some mosaic hops, a very small amount of mosaic hops. Toss them in. We're going to add some yeast nutrient. Toss that in, and I'm just going to stir up some Brew Bright. This is just a fining. You can use Irish moss or nothing. This just cleans up the beer at the end.
Apply the beer a bit. well, the word, I should
Or
say.
yep. Or it ends up with clarifying your
As well, does it? Okay. And what was I going to ask? The nutrient. Do you have any sort of methods that you'd like to use for the nutrient? Do you measure out specific to the
I usually
you're making, or you just sort of ballpark it?
I always measure.
Yep.
Ballpark, you're looking at 1 to 2 teaspoons.
Sure.
So yeah, it's.
Everyone has their own.
Everyone has their own. I didn't really measure this. I suppose, like in any recipe, if you want to reliably replicate results from batch to batch, then you measure and you keep notes.
And take notes, yes.
And it's because you I learn everything the hard way.
That's how I learned too.
I brewed a stout, and it's like, this just didn't turn out, and then I didn't take any notes on it, and I left the bottles for 12 months, and I opened it, it's like, this is absolutely amazing, what did I do? And it's like I went back to my notes and had no notes.
Okay.
So even if it doesn't work out, so even when I come in here and do a demo, and it's not my beer, I still take notes on it, because if I get the chance to try it, I might want to actually brew it again. Although the demos, of course, it's a little bit difficult because you are talking and you're not necessarily hitting every mark. You're not quite as fastidious as you are at home. So okay, so we're heading towards the end of it. So we've touched on that there's a lot of sources of information out there, and I think it's good to there's a lot of there are a lot of YouTube reviews on Saison yeast. Drew Beecham, who I've already talked about, he does some really good stuff. It gets featured in podcasts. There's just bear with me just a moment.
Good resources as well.
You've got things like, the book that I mentioned earlier from the mad fermentationist, Mike Tonsmere.
Oh, yes.
This is an amazing, if you are into, I suppose, funky, sour beers, because whilst we're talking about Saison, there is a definite crossover. This is,
sort of
this is, and this actually steps into a lot of the, the science behind it. A lot of
if anyone's interested, mad fermentationist. I just did Google search mad fermentationist. I'm trying to give his web address, but
he's absolutely. He's got a lot of recipes. He's got a lot of really great stuff on his website, and I can tell you, he's a genuinely really nice man. And these magazines, all brewing magazines, they have a lot of information over time. And I mentioned earlier that BYO, there's a really good article, although I found it rather prescriptive, about Saison available on the internet. This particular magazine from because of course I keep them all, has Brewing Rustic French Ales as an article. So this one's from March, April 2017. So these magazines have some really great stuff available. You can subscribe to these publications, or you can actually become an online digital member only. Of course, you don't get the magazines if you're a digital member only, and then you have to retain your membership to be able to access the information. But this is all really good stuff. Other sources of information, talking about, there was a if you're a member of a home-brew club, there's, I know that there's, the home-brew clubs in Melbourne have some of the most amazing brewers who, if they gave up their day jobs, would be to become brewers. Yeah, we would
That's
be.
a dream, isn't it? That's, yeah.
Yeah, it is a dream. It needs a lot of money behind it. But I think we've got a lot of home brewers who are actually at that level of expertise, where they are producing amazing beers and they have their own house cultures. You know, and they're constantly, you know, seeking further knowledge and learning from each other. So if you are, you know, if you need assistance, you want to bounce ideas, if you're not a member of a homebrew club, seek one out in your area. They're absolutely, it's a very good place to start. Contact your local homebrew store.
Give us a call. That's
you know, well, when pop in if you can pop in.
Well, one day.
Call. You know, get on Facebook. Send an email. Ask a question. Don't sit back and just wonder about it. So the information is out there. It's what you make of it, and don't believe everything you read. Although, of course, I've spoken nothing but words of truth.
Yeah, of course. Except for us.
Except for us. It's what you find is that there is a lot of information out there, and you know, talking about. You know, the prescriptive nature of some recipes, or based on styles. So I'll start wrapping it up. So Saison. It is something that dry, tart, refreshing. It should have a reasonably high level of carbonation. You really want that spritz to actually to lift it. So look. Sorry, what was that, Joel?
Prickly carbonation.
Yeah, it can be a little bit prickly. So as with all brewing, you know, make sure you've got good quality fresh ingredients. Don't get too fixated on the malt bill. You can basically just you know, use whatever you've got on hand. You can make it a little bit complex if you want, but yeah, basically focus on using, you know, 80% of your grist should be a pilsner or an ale malt, and then you can start playing with some different extras if you like. The water, it should definitely, you can play with your water and do whatever it is that you're doing wherever you are. As I said earlier, Melbourne, we have reasonably good water. The only thing that I did for this was dechlorinate it with a Camden tablet. So that's a call out for definitely, if you do nothing else, at least dechlorinate your water. You want to, depending on what you're planning on doing with your yeast, you may want to keep your IBUs very, very low. So we're not going particularly funky, or we're not trying to sour with this particular beer. So the IBUs are a little bit high because it is a hoppy Saison.
Yeah, and American hops too at that, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. No mosaic and the Sabro. So yeah, it is American. Possibly I could have actually swapped that out and done what, you know, Bridgerow did with the India Saison with their collaboration with Nonyo, and used a Ella and Galaxy.
I didn't. In Australia, it's almost a law. You have to use Galaxy.
Yeah, and I would have done that, except I didn't think about it. And I was just a little bit curious to see how Sabro would work with. With the hops. This has now actually just come to the end, so we've had our 60-minute boil with no further debacles or issues. So what I'm going to do is just let that. Hang on. So I'm just going to let this sit here for just a little bit, and in a few minutes I'll give it a whirlpool. So So where was I? For malt, water, the yeast. There are many options out there. Don't be afraid to use multiple different yeasts. Don't be afraid to funk it up or sour it up. It's really, if you don't have great fermentation temperature control, this is a great option for you coming into summer. And just be careful if you are using Brett that you don't contaminate anything else in your brewery space. I suggest that if you're using a plastic fermenter and you've got Brett, is don't use that for straight ales ever again. Keep that for something funky, because it has a tendency to leave traces regardless of how much cleaning and sanitizing you do. And you definitely don't want to, unless of course you deliberately want to do a Brett IPA, you don't want to introduce something into your other beers that is unexpected. So there's plenty of information out there. There's plenty of great recipes out there. There's good information. If you want, information on what the style should be, you can look up the BJCP guidelines.
All right, we're back.
Oh, we're back. We're actually back.
We're back, everyone.
We're back for
just the camera clapped out on us, but that was just a bit of excitement. But we're back to normal. So you were saying, I think you were talking about the BJCP.
Yeah, the guidelines on there give you some really good information about what you expect, an overall impression, what you expect from the aroma, appearance, flavour, mouthfeel, some expected ingredients, which, as you've heard, I've disparaged. I've disparaged a lot of information out there, and yeah, what your overall impression should also, excuse me, yeah, some commercial examples so that you can actually tune in your taste and understand what you're actually expecting from a Saison. But yeah, I would say brew a Saison. If you haven't done it, absolutely do it.
Yeah, do it, and as I said, probably drink as many as you can. I mean, that's good advice for beer in general, in moderation, of course.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Don't go crazy, but yeah, try as many commercial examples as different varieties as you can to get inspired.
Yeah, if you're a member of a homebrew club, seek out. You generally you will have at least one brewer who's going to be heavily into their Saisons, and it's really good to taste those homebrew examples of it. And I've tasted some amazing homebrew Saisons, and it's something that I see that it's a beer style that I will always go back to. It's just so to cap it all off, because we're about to run out of time. It's the You've seen how much effort I've gone to today with this. Yes. You know, the biggest thing was the boil over. The wort is easy to make. It's basically it's all in the yeast, yep. And it's all in the temperature. You want to definitely get the most out of it. You can, and I'm about to wrap up, but there was something that I actually didn't, I meant to touch on, and I think I've got a couple of minutes just to touch on it. And that is something about, where are we? Too many pieces of paper. Okay, that's not working. Anyway, I thought I'd print out. And that is the difference between esters and phenolics. Uh-huh. Just a quick one, because you'll see them actually interchanged, and they do come from very different points. But essentially, your ester is going to be to just really a quick summary. You're going to have its more fruit character, so you're going to have a lot of fruit character coming from esters. Phenolics tend to be more of that clove, and they can be quite medicinal, solventy things that you probably don't want in a beer, and often they are a sign that you do have a problem. Saisons, not so much. It will depend on tannins. For a lot of Saison yeast, you will get some phenolic character coming from it, and that is perfectly acceptable for Saison. So,
pepper, is that a phenolic?
Sorry, what was that?
Pepper flavour? Is it?
I think that's actually more of an ester. I did have a very good. I did have a.
Example of how confusing it can be. Bubble gum. I know.
But no, bubble gum is ester.
An ester as well. Okay, so that's a flavour you would find associated in a lot of Belgian triples and quads and things like that, or wheat beers.
Yeah. So you do a Hefeweizen. You will get Hefeweizen actually produces some of that clove-like. So that sort of yeast, you'll actually get some phenolic character out. Well, anyway, my nice list. Oh wait, here it is. So yes. So basically, I mean, esters and phenols, depending on your beer, can actually be, you don't want them. But for Belgian Saison type things, so when you're looking at esters, you're looking at anise, apple, banana, honey, juicy fruit, gum. You do actually get a little bit of nail polish remover. They're putting there pear and pineapple and strawberry, and of course esters increase with fermentation temperature. But your phenolics, which is mainly always a little bit of cloves, medicine, actually I was wrong. Pepper. Sorry, no, you're right. Pepper was phenolic. Smoke, sweaty horse blankets.
Horse blanket is
tannins, vanilla. So those are some of the things that you get coming out of Brett, and so they're perfectly acceptable for a Saison. But I think that about wraps it up today. It's a great style of beer. I urge you, if you don't want to brew one, at least get out and try one this summer. There's plenty of examples out there. From very low ABV grisettes, up to higher strength. You do occasionally see a darker Saison hit the market. Lots of information available, and it's just one of those when you take a look at all the the amount of yeast strains that are actually out there that we don't have access to. It's mind-blowing. It is, and if you haven't, I'm just going to finish up. If you haven't tried a Saison that you like yet, you just haven't tried the right one, or haven't brewed the right one. So get on it, people, and thank you so much for joining Joel and I today, and happy brewing. And thank you, Joel.
No, my pleasure. So, go brew some Saisons, people. I think you've inspired me. I haven't brewed one for a long time. So.
Get on it. get on it.
I'm gonna have that's gonna have to be on my list. Work it up the list.
Yep.
The never-ending,
Never-ending brew list.
brew list. All right. Well, thanks, Helen. Thanks very much. That
Cheers.
was great. And thank you, everyone, for watching. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.